And so he joined that party, going straight through the desert. And there were times they were attacked by Bedouin raiders and they had to use their camels as grumbling sandbags to return fire. And there were times when the sandstorm, Asif Ramlia, engulfed them, buried them alive. There were fights between pilgrims, fights in which men would rip each other's guts out and then leave the person dying in a half-buried ditch for the jackals to finish the job before the person had even died. Such, wrote Richard, does a shared faith unite mankind. And as he travelled, he changed from language to language to avoid detection and asked 1,000 questions. He would take notes in pitch darkness in his little tent with a notepad with a wire wrapped around the page to guide the nib of his pencil, and then sew the notepad into the folds of his robe. This is how he was able to later write a brilliant 2-volume book, a journal of a personal pilgrimage to Mecca and Al-Madinah. I really recommend you read it. It's extraordinary. And then after a long, long period, they arrived and the pilgrims, the sanctuary! There was Mecca, a walled city surrounded by desert, but inside those walls, orchards, flowers, fountains, mosques, minarets, domes. They were questioned at the gates to find out if they were truly Muslim or if they were kuffar. And Richard passed that test. Of course, he could answer all their questions. Inside, their heads were shaved. They were told not to eat or drink or even swallow saliva for a day and a night. And of course, all his group wanted to go straight to it. They rushed towards the courtyard of El-Kaaba, the cube, the black stone, which is the center of Islam. They arrived, and there were thousands of pilgrims gyrating, rotating, pushing around like some species of marine life, going around and around El-Kaaba. And Richard's group of pilgrims couldn't get close. They tried, but there was a group of Persian pilgrims, Farsi speakers, who were monopolizing the entrance, and they were stroking the surface of El-Kaaba. They were kissing it. They were weeping, and nobody else could get close. And Richard's party were frustrated. Richard knew exactly what to do. He found a little safe vantage point, and then in fluent Farsi, which he spoke, by the way, he knew how much Persian men worshipped and revered their mothers, and so he began to curse their mothers.
Hey! Mother Kahbaha! Berin birun! Kusse kharatun gaida. Iran ek sabat. Berin! Mother Kahbaha.
That did the trick. Who's that speaking of my mama? Who would she say about my mum? And they lost their grip on El-Kaaba. And Richard's group got close. Richard didn't get close enough. He didn't get inside, not on that occasion. He stayed in Mecca, taking notes, noting everything. And then some weeks later, he was woken before daybreak by a servant lad called Muhammad, who was attached to Richard for bakshish, who said, Saidi, El-Kaaba is open and it's empty. And so in the dead of early morning, Richard followed Muhammad through the streets, and there that great courtyard was empty. Completely empty. And there were 2 huge guards with their spears crossed, and they questioned Richard, and he passed their examination. They opened their spears, they let him inside, and Richard, inside. Well, now, he, an Englishman, was alone inside the very heart of Islam. And it was empty. To him, at any rate. He later wrote that what for a pilgrim, for a believer, would have been the fulfillment of a lifetime of yearning and of devotion, for him was nothing more than the satisfaction of pride and ambition. But, carefully, with the guards with their backs turned to him, he pigeon-stepped around El-Kaaba, measuring it with the length of his feet, measuring its length, its breadth, estimating its height. He examined the surface closely and concluded that it was mostly made of silicate and that it was undoubtedly an asteroid. And having done that, well, he had nothing else to do in Mecca. He was bored. And so as soon as he could, he followed a pilgrim train going home. And his whole journey there and back took him over a year living in disguise. But now he was wearing the green turban of the acknowledged Haji. And now wherever he went, people greeted him, Richard Burton, always the outsider, always the stranger. They greeted him as one, not only one of them, but one of the best of them. And so when he took a house outside Cairo to write the 2 volumes that I described, he stayed in this identity. He stayed living as Haji Abdullah, a seductive identity for the eternal stranger.